Liberty in our lifetimes in a free state of our own. That's the vision. That's the dream. We are building it in New Hampshire. I'm Eric Brakey, your host and renegade statesman for the Porcupine Report. Welcome to your source for porcupine news and free-range conversation on matters of liberty. All right, let's hop into the show. Hey there, all you porcupines, you. This is your host, your renegade statesman, your executive director of the New Hampshire Free State Project, Eric Brakey. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is episode 75, and of course, we come to you every single Wednesday at 7 o'clock p.m. with a brand new episode, usually. We always have something for you every Wednesday at 7, and it's usually a new episode. So thank you to all everyone out there as our audience continues to grow and we continue getting wonderful feedback and great ideas. Always welcome suggestions for guests and topics to cover. And we're going to have a great conversation today. Before we get into today's show, first of all, let me do a quick note from our sponsor, which is, as always, Porcupine Coffee Roasting. Well, this isn't just coffee. It's a revolution in your mug, proudly operated by Free Staters in the Free State. They roast only specialty grade beans from small producers, always fresh, roasted in small batches to order with a roast date you can trust. No stale beans from these liberty lovers. Porcupine Coffee is all about sovereignty. As a private membership association, they embody the live free or die ethic, giving freedom-minded folks like you a way to choose liberty with every sip. It's crafted for the caffeinated and the freedom-loving, perfect for those living with the free state spirit, whether you're in New Hampshire or unfortunate enough to live in parts less free. Here's the deal. At porcupinecoffeeroasting.com, you can use our discount code PORCREPORT to get 15% off your order of individual products. Plus, a portion of your purchase will go to help support this very program. So that's a win-win-win. A win for you, a win. You get great coffee. A win for the program. We get some support, and a win for a great Free State private membership association. So grab your fresh roasted coffee and support liberty one cup at a time. Head to porcupinecoffeeroasting.com and use Pork Report for 15% off. Live free, drink free. Stay caffeinated, my friends. Don't mind if I do. Thank you to our friends at Porcupine Coffee Roasting. All right. A few things to mention before we get into today's conversation with a good friend of mine. I want to note, this will probably be something we're talking about, actually. At the end of this week, I and many good handful of Free Staters are heading south to Lake Jackson, Texas for the Ron Paul barbecue. We're celebrating Ron Paul's 90th birthday. The good doctor has given us so much, and I'm looking forward to wishing him well on his 90th birthday and celebrating all of his accomplishments and the seeds that he has planted for the liberty movement that we are now reaping. So I'm very excited about that. And of course, while we're down there, we're going to be meeting many other liberty lovers from outside New Hampshire and pitching them on, why they should come visit New Hampshire. And so many of our events that are going on year round. Look, everyone knows about Pork Fest. I mean, every good libertarian should know about Pork Fest, and people know about the New Hampshire Liberty Forum. But what you may not know, and you should know, is that there are liberty events going on year round in New Hampshire. It's unlike anything you will find in any other state in this country. If you go to our Liberty calendar, our New Hampshire Liberty calendar at fsp.org, you will see that almost every single day something is happening, whether it's meetups or rucking groups or potlucks or all kinds of different interest groups and hobbyist groups for those who love liberty. So go check out our website, fsp.org. Check out the community calendar. And here's a few exciting things that are coming up in the near future. We just announced, and we're still hammering out the details here, so we'll be opening up registration soon. But on September 21st, we're going to be doing our first annual. We're hoping to make this an annual event. This will be the first time we're doing it. September 21st, it's a Sunday, calling it the Granite Freedom Trek. We're going to be hiking in New Hampshire during one of the most beautiful times of year, as autumn is setting in and the foliage is starting to change. We're going to be doing a Granite Freedom Trek, a day-long hike for those who'd like to join us. A great opportunity to visit New Hampshire and to spend some time with great Free State community. So mark your calendar for that. I will have more details coming soon. Also mark your calendar for Columbus Day weekend in October, the long 3-day weekend. We've got a lot going on. Including that Sunday is going to be the Free State Bitcoin Digital Asset Conference. Great opportunity for those who are interested in what is going on the cutting edge in cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and blockchain technologies. That's hosted right here in the Free State by our friends Bruce and Carol Ann Fenton. And that same weekend, we also have Fall Fest, which is a variety of family-friendly events that are taking place all throughout the long weekend, put on by our friends at Independence Realty. We're talking corn mazes. There'll be a family-friendly hike. There will be apple picking, a whole bunch of family-friendly fall activities. And so if you're just you're looking for an opportunity to visit New Hampshire and bring the family, it's a great opportunity. And here's the combo that I love. Like, maybe you are a Bitcoin enthusiast and you love kind of the idea of going to the Free State Bitcoin Digital Asset Conference, but you thought maybe I'll leave my family behind because maybe they're not as into all of that and they'd be bored. While you would be so engaged in these topics going on. Well, you don't need to leave your family behind. They can come for the whole week and enjoy the family-friendly activities of Fall Fest over the long Columbus Day weekend in October, while you enjoy the Free State Bitcoin Digital Asset Conference. And then you can join them for the family-friendly activities the other days. Anyway, mark your calendars for Columbus Day weekend. I should have the dates right in front of me, but I didn't write them down, so shame on me. But look it up on your calendar. Which weekend is Columbus Day weekend? It'll be there. So mark your calendars for that. Would love to have you join us. I know that registration is now open for the Free State Bitcoin Digital Asset Conference. I think that's at blockchainnh.com. And Fall Fest details will be following shortly. So some great events coming up in the next couple of months. And of course, there's always events going on all throughout the year, every single day. You could literally pick a week, come to New Hampshire, and you'll have so much to do and so much of the Free State community to meet. So those are some great things that are coming up. And I also want to plug very briefly our Porcupine Patron program. Our Porcupine patrons are individuals who donate at least $10 a month or $100 a year, and they get all kinds of benefits for it. Our Porcupine patrons help fund our year-round mission. In exchange, they get some nice perks, including access to a print quarterly newsletter that comes straight to their home. They get a nice Porcupine patron lapel pin, which also grants privileges and special perks at all Free State Project events like PorcFest and Liberty Forum. And you get you get access to our private Porcupine patron signal group, where you get great access to me and FSP leadership and other Porcupine patrons who are always having great ideas to share and discuss. So we currently have, as of right now, 184 active Porcupine patrons. Thank you to all of them for supporting the Free State Project and the work that we do year round. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, which means donations are tax deductible, in case that matters to you. And I'd love to get to 200 patrons by the end of summer. So we got to pick up 16 more. And I would love it if one of those was you. So you can learn about all the benefits that we offer and the ways that you can contribute to support the Free State Project by going to fsp.org/give. Would love to count you in. Thank you in advance for being a Porcupine patron. And to our Porcupine patrons who already are, thank you. You make the work that we do possible. All right, let's hop into the show. So I'm really pleased to welcome back to the show a good friend of mine who is probably embarrassed whenever I sing his praises because I've been doing it for years and years. This guy literally is the guy who played. I wouldn't say he was the only person who contributed to this. There were a number of influencers along the way, but this gentleman really helped me see the light with content that he was producing back in the Tea Party days in 2010 and 2011, back when I was on the cusp of breaking away from the neoconservative paradigm I'd found myself in, and that Fox News had given to me, as a loyal just TV consumer. And this guy really helped me understand why, if I was a conservative who believed in actual conservative principles of the Constitution, why, if I was consistent, I would actually realize that I was a libertarian, and that a figure like Ron Paul was really the only candidate running for president at the time who actually cared about the Constitution and the principles that we were supposed to stand for. So I really appreciate this gentleman for helping me break kind of out of the mental prison that I was in. And he is still doing great work every single day. I think one of the best communicators to conservatives in the liberty movement. I want to welcome back to the show, Jack Hunter.
Hello, Eric. Always good to be with you, and always appreciate your kind praise.
Well, I feel like I owe you a debt of gratitude, Jack, because I'm not sure I would be here today if it wasn't for the work that you were doing back in the Tea Party days, waking a lot of recovering Fox News watchers out of their stupor. So,
yeah, that was certainly quite the journey, and what a different place we are in today for a variety of reasons. And the man we're going to talk about approaching his 90th birthday as of this recording, Ron Paul.
Yeah, well, we will get into that. I guess we could just hop right into that. Jack, you recently wrote two pieces. One on how Ron Paul's the work that he did has shaped the trajectory of where the Republican Party is today on foreign policy, and another where you described Ron Paul as your Pat Buchanan.
Right.
Where would you like to begin?
Let's start with the foreign policy one first, because they both sort of complement each other. People came into the liberty movement at different intervals. Some people came in way after the 2012 presidential election and knew maybe Rand Paul more than they knew Ron Paul, or knew Thomas Massey more than they kept up with, you know what I'm saying, different parts. But in 2008, when Ron Paul ran for president, there was libertarianism in the United States, but there wasn't the liberty movement to the degree that we have it right now. The only exceptions to that, I would say, would be like the Free State Project, which was pretty healthy before Ron Paul ran for president in 2008. Obviously, you have the Cato Institute and Reason Magazine and all these different wonderful things. But Ron Paul really exploded it in a big way. And part of that was the date was May 15th, 2007, that I pinpoint that the Ron Paul revolution began. That was the moment in which Ron Paul stood on a Republican presidential debate stage and had a spat with Rudy Giuliani. And that spat was over what happened on 9/11. Why did 9/11 happen? And Ron Paul explained that our constant foreign intervention overseas, the United States, and constantly trying to be the policeman of the world. If you read what Osama bin Laden had to say after 9/11, it was that. It was our presence on the Arabian Peninsula, certainly our alliance with Israel and sort of the one-sidedness of that. And when Ron Paul said this think about it, the 2008 Republican Party, which, George W. Bush was still president. This is the election in which Barack Obama became president, would become. But this was almost a year before that would happen. Ron Paul's talking to this Republican audience that's been marinated in Bush, Cheney for 8 long years. Maybe polling showed at the time that all of them weren't happy with how the Iraq war had gone, but few to none of them would say it was a mistake or even that we shouldn't do something like that again. They all defended torture and rounding up people and taking them to black sites and mass surveillance. Most neoconservative Republican Party in the history of the Republican Party. That's what Ron Paul was walking into in 2008 and telling all these people and the other candidates, yeah, y'all got it wrong. The Iraq war was wrong, and we were attacked on 9/11, which had nothing to do with the Iraq war, but because of our constant foreign intervention, I'm an anti-war Republican, and we shouldn't do that anymore. Rudy Giuliani was pissed off. He was offended. This was America's mayor, the mayor of New York City when 9/11 happened. And he asked Ron Paul, he was running for president and considered the front runner really at that time. He said, I would hope that the congressman didn't really mean that. I would ask him to retract his statement. This was Rudy Giuliani demanding a retraction from Ron Paul. What did Dr. Paul do instead? He doubled down. He said, well, let me go further. I'll explain the CIA term blowback and why the agency developed that. And they developed it to describe things like 9/11 that might blow back on us because of our foreign intervention overseas. The reason I'm saying this, you had to be there to understand just how pro-war the Republican Party was in 2008. This was the Bush-Cheney Republican Party. I was working in talk radio as a conservative pundit. I quit using the word conservative because people would be like, oh, yeah, I like Dick Cheney too. I'm like, no, that's not what I am. But that was the environment that Ron Paul walked into. Every expert that night on May 15th, 2007 said that Ron Paul's campaign was over. He was done. Because he betrayed Bush-Cheney orthodoxy, essentially, neoconservatism. They were all that, didn't even call it that. That's how effective it was. That's when the Ron Paul revolution exploded. That's when he started drawing thousands to his rallies. That's when so many young people, thousands, joined him at Berkeley and Deep Blue, California. Thousands more just weeks apart joined him at Liberty University, an evangelical school. That's what was going on. That was the beginning of softening up the Republican Party. The Tea Party would come right after that, the 2008 cycle. And getting to this point where, even though as somebody who voted for Trump, I think he's gone back on so much of what he said, including foreign policy. I'm very disappointed. But the idea that a red meat, America first conservative would not want to be in endless wars, as Donald Trump has said, Ron Paul was the beginning of that happening in the modern Republican Party. I went through some of the debate moments in my pieces. One of the Fox hosts said at one point when Ron Paul was talking about non-interventionism, should we follow the marching orders of Al-Qaeda? That's what they always do, right? The neocons. If we think we shouldn't be involved in these wars, somehow we're on the side of Saddam Hussein or Vladimir Putin or, whatever's going on. And he answered that effectively. There were so many of those moments, and but my title is Ron Paul took a battering ram to Republican foreign policy. That's exactly what he did. And a lot of people today, especially if you're younger and you're in the liberty movement, you see a big space to sort of lean right and be a conservative libertarian or whatever flavor of libertarian you are and be anti-war. And that's not considered just some far left thing. Ron Paul it was always that way. Pat Buchanan was an anti-war Republican when he ran in 92 and 96 and 2000 on the Reform Party ticket. But Ron Paul did it in a bigger way at a time when it mattered more, because when Pat Buchanan ran, he was sort of against Operation Desert Storm in 1990, which was George H.W. Bush and was very popular. But still, that anti-war message resonated with a 19, 20-year-old like me at the time. When Ron Paul did it, as I said, it was 2007. Bush was still president, and that's the Republican Party he was walking into. He was a revolutionary in many ways, but that's one that's always resonated with me.
It is amazing looking back on it. And of course, I was a young person at the time. This is just what I understood the Republican Party to be. It was a neoconservative pro-war party. But one thing that I always kind of helped me understand the context of the moment that we were in at the time was you would point out that this was not what the Republican Party always was. That you go back to folks like, was it Robert Taft, Mr. Republican, who was more of a, I don't know if he would be an explicit non-interventionist, but he was certainly more skeptical of kind of the growth of this military empire and the military industrial complex. And how you look at a lot of the history of the conservative movement in America before this kind of the zenith of the neoconservatives and kind of you helped me understand, and I think a lot of people understand exactly what a perversion the moment was that we were in back then, where there was absolutely no debate permitted. It was totally uniform kind of lockstep in the Republican Party until Ron Paul took that battering ram and burst those doors open to free discourse and debate on these topics. And it is I think it is very interesting to watch today. Of course, Donald Trump came in and capitalized on that and used some of that rhetoric, and he's been inconsistent, we'll be generous,
right,
in his application of kind of those ideas, frustratingly so. But it is very interesting to see that today, folks who are, the Trump movement is often accused of being like a cult of personality, that people just, look at Trump as if he's their cult leader, and they'll follow whatever he does. And if he disagrees with what he said the previous day, the people just flip and follow to wherever he is and do whatever he says. But of course, I think we've seen that that's not exactly true, that there does seem to be a more principled skepticism of the neoconservative foreign policy status quo in the Trump base, that many influential folks like Tucker Carlson, for example, and many others, not just kind of large personalities, but kind of regular people who otherwise voted for and supported Donald Trump and were very optimistic about him, will stand and say, hey, this war with Iran or unconditional support to the Netanyahu administration and the Likud party in Israel is not America first. It's not what we stood for, what we thought we were voting for. And so it does seem to me, I guess that's the kind of bit of encouragement is, that door was opened. Ron took the battering ram to it. And even as Trump oscillates, it seems like there is some kind of a non-interventionist Pandora's box that's been opened in the Republican Party, that even if they manage to co-opt Donald Trump and pull him towards the Mark Levins of the world, the many of the Republican base is not hopping on board. What do you make of all that?
Correct. And Ron Paul, 2008, was the seed of what we're seeing now. Let me explain that a little bit more. You mentioned earlier, Eric, that you were once a neocon. Basically, you believed the things that the Bush-Cheney era believed about Iraq and torture and all that. And you weren't alone in that, for sure. What it means to be a conservative or a Republican has changed many times. You said that a lot of Trump's critics, of which I am one right now, but for different reasons than the people I'm about to talk about, say that the MAGA people are in a cult. Well, they probably are. So are the people who hate MAGA and are obsessed with Trump to the degree that they can't stop talking about. They're also in a cult. I mean, those are the people who wanted Kamala Harris to become president, even though she was campaigning with Liz Cheney and giving winks to the military-industrial complex. That's who they wanted to win. There are people who were blue, voted for Obama because he was against Bush's war, right? But that's where they were. I would call that a cult. You're crazy if you think like Liz Cheney's friend that she's hair braiding with that's who needs to be the next president. You're in a cult too. It's always changing. Ron Paul would always bring up, you mentioned Robert Taft earlier. There's a statue in Washington that doesn't get enough love. It says Mr. Republican. That was his nickname in his era. When he ran for president post-World War II, it was against Dwight Eisenhower. Now let's think about that for a second. Dwight Eisenhower, who in his farewell address would warn about an encroaching military-industrial complex, he was more of the globalist and the person who was more of an interventionist, running against Robert Taft, who didn't think we should be in NATO and was less interventionist. That was the dynamic in the GOP of that era. Think about that. Because neocons hate Eisenhower and that thing about the military-industrial complex because, of course, they serve the military-industrial complex. They're spokesmen for it. They are servers of it. That's where that GOP was. Ron Paul would point out that when Nixon ran for president, he was promising to get us out of Vietnam. And that's what people voted for. Is that how it worked out? Well, not exactly, but that's what people voted for. When George W. Bush ran for president in 2000, he said we need a more humble foreign policy. Ron Paul would point this out all the time. Obviously, 9/11 happened, and he had a different legacy. The reason Bush was saying that was because in 1996, the stringently anti-war Pat Buchanan won the New Hampshire primary. So you want to appeal to those people. At the time, that was the religious right people who were also pretty anti-war if you followed Pat Buchanan. You see what I'm saying? Then 9/11 happened, and the neocons just exploited everybody's pain and fear for their own purposes that had nothing to do with 9/11. So what you're seeing right now is what I voted for when I voted for Donald Trump. I voted for him to live up to his no more endless wars and a number of other things. And right now he's not doing that. He's doing everything Netanyahu wants. But who's speaking out against him? It's what you just said, Eric. You have this Tucker Carlson's just as anti-war as he ever was. Steve Bannon, who's no libertarian, is just as anti-war as he ever was. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's not a libertarian exactly, though she does some libertarian-friendly things sometimes and a lot of other things, is being pretty harsh about what's going on in Gaza and saying the president's wrong and this needs to end and, calling it what it is. Rand Paul never wavers. His dad, Ron Paul, never wavers. I'm talking about in foreign policy or really anything else, but they're all anti-war. Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire has been very outspoken about what's going on in Gaza and Trump's complicity in it. All of that's what we're for. If they all just laid down and were like, oh, we're neocons now, Trump's showing us the way, let's hang out with Mark Levin and Lindsey Green. That's not what I voted for. I didn't expect the people I'm talking about right now to ever do that, and they're not. And that has an effect on the right. That has an effect on the Republican Party. I know there's many Libertarian Party members watching this. It could have an effect on that too. It certainly did in the last cycle, and what happened with the LP and the current administration and Ross Ulbricht, for one example. That's part of the liberty movement. All the people I just described are not libertarians or necessarily part of the liberty movement, but our movement is big and has major players, and it's part of this bigger thing that's sort of anti-establishment and certainly anti-war. There's a lot to work with right there. I'd include Vice President J.D. Vance in that resistance to the degree he can say what he's allowed to. Tulsi Gabbard, some others.
I mean, some of these folks in the administration, I'm glad that they're there, but I almost want to ask them, blink twice if you
right
being held hostage.
Yes, sir.
I feel a little bad. I look at someone like Tulsi Gabbard, who I think was obviously put in a terrible position with the whole kind of the attacks on Iran, and of course she'd been on record saying what seems pretty clear to me to be the truth, that Iran was not, that our intelligence community did not assess that Iran was making any strides towards achieving nuclear weapons, but that was not the narrative coming out of the Netanyahu administration, and it seems that the Trump administration went on board with that against Tulsi's own report, and she had to oscillate a little bit, maybe to try to preserve, her job, which was disappointing. I certainly, a lot of people are making kind of references to, Colin Powell's legitimacy being used to push the war in Iraq, which he was, I think, personally opposed to, but seemed to go along with it when he was arm twisted. But then, of course, Tulsi has come out, of course, with the whole starting to break, spill the documents on what went on with Russiagate, and it makes me very glad that Tulsi is there, because this is something that we do need to have a reckoning on in this country, is the abuse of our intelligence community to, however you feel about Donald Trump, like our unelected deep state should not be able to override the will of the people in terms of having the officials that we elect be the ones who are actually determining policy, particularly foreign policy. It seemed like there was a whole effort by the outgoing Obama administration and unelected folks in the intelligence community to box him in and push us towards this conflict with Russia, which they did very successfully. And Trump sadly did not have the fortitude to withstand that, and ended up giving weapons to Ukraine and all this and all that. We're a little off track there, but it is nice to see that folks like Tulsi are in there, even if they have to play some games I don't always like.
Yeah, I don't I can't rationalize why Trump all of a sudden thought Tucker Carlson had bad ideas and Mark Levin and Lindsey Graham were the guys to go with. Like that's befuddling to me. Graham and Levin have positioned themselves as allies, but they're both neoconservatives. Trump knows enough to know what that is and to know that he's doing what when all the never Trump neocons are like Trump's Hitler and the worst thing ever start going, man, Trump's doing some great stuff now. You know something's gone wrong because that's what's happening. I've seen Bill Kristol, who's a full-blown Democrat at this point, be like, well, you go with, he's an authoritarian, but you go with the president you have. When he, bombed Iran or something like that, that's when you know something's gone wrong. But I think after Trump's term is done, and hopefully things get better, I don't know. I think that what he created with the America First movement, with the precursor being the Liberty movement and Ron Paul and Rand Paul, and what Thomas Massey's doing Mosh for a time before he did some different things, all that matters. And it's, Eric, it's how you and I know each other, through the Ron Paul movement. You always say these kind of things about me. We're all part of this, however great or small.
It certainly had seemed to me, and I was certainly an advocate for kind of the coalition building to kind of oust the neoconservatives from their position of power in the GOP, between kind of the liberty wing of the GOP and this kind of emerging kind of MAGA wing of the GOP. I guess it was emergent at the time. Now it's here. But it did always seem to me that perhaps once the neoconservatives were ousted, that there would potentially come a point of conflict, because there's overlap between these two movements, but there are also clear points of difference. And yet, at the same time, some of the people who seem to be some of the most sincere and earnest in the America First movement, or the MAGA movement, like you mentioned, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Frankly, I was been very surprised by Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think, like a lot of folks, when she came in, maybe I bought some of the I don't know, the stuff people were saying about her. She was not a serious person. She was brought in all these conspiracy theories that I never looked into very closely. And I remember, and I don't want to put you on the spot, Jack, because I know you're friends with Nancy Mason, South Carolina, but it was interesting to watch kind of, I guess they were fighting early on, and I kind of found myself like, yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene is not serious. Nancy Mace is like the more serious person who's there to do kind of liberty business. And yet it seems like, from watching, like, I don't know if it was like, I mean, again, I know that you have a friendship with Nancy. I don't want to put you in a tough spot, but it almost seems like I've been watching like a Freaky Friday situation where it's like Marjorie Taylor Greene has really seemed to mature in the role and find some principled convictions that she's standing on as far as our nation's foreign policy. And I'm sure there's other things I disagree with her on. Whereas I don't know what's going on in Nancy's heart, but I certainly feel like I've been pretty disappointed in watching kind of her shift towards a lot of the more conventional Republican lines.
I'll just focus on Green. I had the same perception as you for a long time, like, the QAnon lady, the crazy conspiracy, this, that, and the other, and Christian nationalism, which I think sounds awful. And I say that as somebody who is Christian. I just think it's blasphemous and not the way to think about that. It's a matter of tone for a lot of people, I guess, and perception. But if you vote the right way and you stand up, even when it's the easiest thing for Marjorie Taylor Greene to do right now is be like, Trump's right about everything. I love Trump. Trump's great, as some people are doing. And she's like, no, he ran on this America First agenda and genocides are bad. I'm going to use that word and say that. And Trump needs to be better. That's what she's saying. On other issues too, fiscal conservatism, lots of different things. The Federal Reserve, she's spoken out about that. I applaud that. If her reputation was she was the crazy aunt who wanted to start a fight at Thanksgiving dinner, which she kind of was, okay, but look at where she's standing on the issues and how she's voting. Well, that kind of takes precedent for me other than the other stuff. I would vote for my crazy aunt or uncle at the Thanksgiving table who's just starting, arguments for no reason, if they were also members of Congress and voting ways that I found valuable. Like, that just matters more, right? So I think it's cool to see that somebody has influence like her. She's done books. People listen to her. A lot of MAGA faithful who could go either way. Well, Trump and Mark Levin are over here. I like them. They're great. I'm MAGA. They're MAGA. Oh, I like Marjorie Taylor Greene too. She's MAGA. Well, well, she's right. That is what Trump said. They might listen to her. That's her value.
Yeah.
And God bless her for doing it.
It did always say, yeah, I don't remember who said it, but I think it was true that maybe it was Tho Bishop or but like the Trump base is better than Trump.
Yeah,
and,
totally.
and it does seem that there is and so I when friends like Austin friends of mine like Austin Pageant and others are Vivek Ramaswamy's been big on this too, like, you know, what is the America First MAGA movement going to look like in a post-Trump world? And so there is, it does seem to me there is a legitimate kind of fight for the soul of that movement and the people who compose it, for where it goes. Is this something that's going to be co-opted by the Ben Shapiros and the Mark Levins and become kind of, I mean, this is kind of what neoconservatives have always done, right? They're kind of a little bit kind of chameleons, right? They adopt the language of whatever movement is in power so that they can kind of steer and co-opt that movement. And for people who, you know, they know that they're conservatives, but they don't necessarily have a fixed idea of what conservative means, they can redefine it to mean, well, conservative means that we are conserving the global military empire, not the Constitution,
right,
not the Republic, right? That's what it means to be a conservative. If you don't want to conserve that, we exclude you. Of course, that's what they did in the George W. Bush days, and it seems to be what they're trying to do now with the America First movement. And America First for them, it's like, oh yeah, we're America First. America First means that America has to be the first to invade. America has to be the first country in the global empire that we are forming, where I guess maybe the neoliberals envision a global empire where America is one of many nations composing this thing. But you know, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, the Tucker Carlsons, I suppose these folks give me some hope that maybe, you know, after this term, it won't just become a neoconservative movement in new garb.
And I agree with everything you just said. I'm going to elaborate. When John McCain was the nominee for president in 2008 for the Republicans and chose Sarah Palin, that came from the Tea Party was in its early days. Ron Paul had just, you know, was part of that and making it easier for conservatives to think a little different about matters of war and peace, opening up minds, bringing in lots of independents who were just apolitical, who were open to that. Palin was in part picked by Bill Kristol. He knew we had John McCain, a thorough neoconservative, running for president, but he knew that the mood was a little different at the base. A lot of them were disenchanted with Bush Cheney, even if maybe they wouldn't say so. Palin was a Tea Party, grassroots, right? Put her with McCain, and one of the first things they did was hire a foreign policy advisor named Randy Schuneman, who was a neoconservative. It worked for years to bring Ukraine into NATO, a decade before we were talking about it now and what's going on there. And he started to implant with the Palin team neocon ideas. And sometimes she would say things that sounded a little closer to Ron Paul in foreign policy, but by the time that campaign got going well, she was saying more neocon things. The point is, that's what neoconservatives are good at. They read the room. They're like, how can we still dominate and manipulate and massage the situation for our own benefit? They tried there. McCain lost, Obama won, and whatever. The base is absolutely within MAGA better than the administration, or at least the president. That is absolutely true, and that's where I see a lot of hope. What's going on with our relationship with Israel and what Israel is doing to Gaza and us paying for it? If this was 15 years ago, legacy media would be acting like nothing was happening and there would be no independent media to counter it, and social media wouldn't be what it is. They can't hide anymore. They can't hide if this administration wants to ignore Jeffrey Epstein and what he did. That doesn't work. There are enough voices saying, no, A, you promised this. B, it's the opposite of what you said you were going to do. And C, you're not doing what you promised. It's out there and it's mainstream. And I don't mean mainstream like it's on ABC News or in the New York Times. I mean on the social media that people look at now more than they look at the New York Times or ABC News. That's where we're at. And those voices can speak out and speak up. Once Trump's not president anymore, I don't know what that looks like, but the establishment, so to speak, neoconservatives and the Democrats who are just fine with And the Republicans, who are definitely still neoconservative, can't control the narrative anymore, can't control the party. That's what populism is, and why I've always been a populist, and I'm a libertarian populist today. I don't expect some think tank to write a white paper and be like, this is what's wrong with government. People in charge, here you go. And they're like, damn, I never thought about that. We got to change everything now. It's moneyed interests. It's political interests. You have to batter them. You have to challenge them. And that's why the MAGA base is better than who's president right now, even though he made a bunch of promises. That's what I see a lot of hope for in the future. I'd love to see Tulsi Gabbard run for president. I'd love to see Rand Paul run for president again. I don't know anything, but I'd love to see that. Probably never going to happen, but you see what I'm saying? There's possibilities. And it's not all about who runs for president. That's just what people focus on, like they focus on the Super Bowl. All those games that preceded the Super Bowl matter too. So yeah, all of them. The Free State Project matters. What we're talking about today matters.
Yeah.
My next silly column I write hopefully matters on some level. But it's those efforts combined that make a movement.
Yeah.
I think the Liberty movement is as strong as it ever was, and it's part of the MAGA movement, whether some people like that, don't like that or not.
Well, and I think that, one of the things that I think the Liberty movement really took in stride since the Tea Party days was an internal understanding that the state legislatures matter. Mm-hmm. Everyone is, I think we had in the Tea Party days, there was a big focus on the 10th Amendment and the power of the state legislatures and what can be done there to kind of restore this, the proper constitutional order. And while so many folks have fought for control of Washington, D.C., I think there has been led by organizations like Young Americans for Liberty, and here in New Hampshire, the Free State Movement has really contributed to this capturing of these offices of the state legislatures. And for me, it's like, boy, if the Liberty Movement controlled all the state legislatures of this country, then I would not care so much who the president was, because we could nullify and fight back so many of these unconstitutional federal policies. And so that is encouraging. I think that is kind of one of the seeds that Ron Paul planted that has really kind of grown to fruition, which you don't hear about on TV because everyone's focused on the Washington, D.C. circus. And I can understand why. It's very entertaining and it gets a lot of eyeballs. But let me ask you, Jack, the other piece that you published recently was you referenced that Ron Paul was your Pat Buchanan. What did you mean by that?
So when I was 19, 20 years old, I was a Southerner living in Boston. I was playing with my rock band up there, trying to find my way in the world as a young man. But that's when I started getting interested in politics. And it was like listening to Rush Limbaugh as a teenager to begin with. But around that time, I started to discover the old right, figures like Russell Kirk and Richard Weaver. I started to discover how historically the American right had been anti-war. That happened to be at the same time when Pat Buchanan was running for president in 1996. And he was a populist candidate who was anti-war, very what we would consider MAGA today on trade and some other issues I disagreed with him on. But that sort of captured my young mind. I'm an anti-war conservative. I wasn't libertarian then. Ron Paul would turn me into a libertarian later. But that happened. It was exciting to me as a young person. And I thought after the 96 election, he won the New Hampshire primary, even though he wasn't the nominee. That's the year Bill Clinton won. Bob Dole was the nominee. That the Buchanan brigades, as we recall, were going to take over the Republican Party and change American politics forever. That didn't happen. A few short years later, 9/11 happened, and the Republican Party was the opposite of an anti-war Pat Buchanan party. I was working in political talk radio, and I'm like, well, that was our shot. I was 20. It's never going to happen again. And in 2007, when I was in my early 30s, that's when Ron Paul happened. And it was bigger, even. It was certainly more youthful. So that's part of what I mean. There's a certain amount of people, some are based in D.C. and other places around my age, who were also Buchananites, but were also Ron Paul supporters. We thought it was never going to happen again. And to have this massive anti-war movement on the right again through Ron Paul and his campaigns was something we never expected. We were like, holy crap, the Pat Buchanan thing's happening again. Now, I was old enough in my 30s to understand there were political differences between Pat Buchanan, the nationalist, and Ron Paul, the libertarian constitutionalist. But that's not what was important. The important thing was the populist thread that both of them shared, that the of their party did not want them to succeed and did everything they did to stop it, but the organic grassroots carried them far. and it mattered in American politics. So that's sort of what I meant by the piece. I also included in it, when I was working on the Tea Party Goes to Washington by Senator Rand Paul, interviewing his wife Kelly. One of the first events they went to as a couple was a Pat Buchanan campaign event. A lot of people probably don't know that when Ron Paul decided to run for Congress again in the 90s, and the establishment did not want Ron Paul back in Congress, Pat Buchanan endorsed Ron Paul for the same reasons I'm talking about. During the 2008 debates, when all the neocons on Fox and all the other places were saying, "Oh, Ron Paul, he's a liberal Democrat, he's against the war, he's not a real conservative," blah blah blah. People forget this. Pat Buchanan was on MSNBC at the same time as Tucker Carlson. That's who was on MSNBC in 2008, and saying Ron Paul won the debates, and here's why. So you see what I'm saying? A lot of love between the two. Some people very close to Ron Paul contacted me after that piece ran at the American Conservative this week, and we had very similar paths and are around the same age. So,
yeah. I'm thinking about, something you said earlier about populism, right? And I think Jack, I think you've been really great on this particular insight, because I think I hear so many people who confuse populism with kind of what we might traditionally think of as political ideologies like libertarianism or conservatism, or libertarianism has an actual there's an ideological framework, where populism, right, is not. It doesn't have an ideological framework. It's just it's who are you mobilizing against whom? You're mobilizing the people against entrenched established institutions. To what end and for what ideology is always the question. Bernie Sanders was a populist of a sort, but certainly not the kind of populism that I identify with. Whereas someone like Murray Rothbard, I think, really kind of was someone who really kind of found the sweet spot in terms of kind of a libertarian populist strategy, which kind of manifested in Ron Paul. And you can even kind of point to the rise of Javier Milei as a manifestation of that. And by the way, because I just want to say, because I know as we talk about Israel that there will be some people who misconstrue certain things. Murray Rothbard, who's one of my heroes, and I look to very much, was Jewish, and I try to be very, very particular, especially when we're talking about these things that I'm just saying this for the audience. I don't say Jewish when I mean Zionist, and I don't say Zionist when I mean the Likud party, and I don't say the Likud party when I mean Benjamin Netanyahu. I think we should be, we should all be kind of clear in our language and not lump folks in with actions taken by specific individuals that are extremely objectionable. So I know a lot of Jewish individuals who don't support Zionism, and I know Zionists who don't support the Likud party. So anyway, I just wanted to put that on the record.
Sure. No, we need to be very clear about that. It kind of bothers me how much the neoconservatives have been able to weaponize like any criticism of, I always say that if you read the Reagan diaries and his criticisms of dealing with some Israeli officials, and we were an ally of Israel at that time and are today, would be construed as anti-Semitic by 2025 standards of some of these Republicans and mainstream Democrats. That's absurd. Ronald Reagan was not in it, but that's how badly they've been able to say, oh, if you criticize Israel's governments and their actions, you must hate Jewish people. Those are two very separate things. Anybody who people or black people or any other kind of people just because of their identity and what they are, their race, their ethnicity, I hate you. I don't like you. Get away from me. I want love and peace among all people. I have no tolerance whatsoever for anti-Semites, but I also have no tolerance for governments doing horrible things. And I think Israel's government is right now. Two of my favorite critics of it are Jewish, Glenn Greenwald and Dave Smith. I mean, come on, what are we talking about?
Yeah. And it's very interesting. There's Jack. I don't know if you've listened to it, but Daryl Cooper did his whole it was like 10-hour, maybe even longer than that, but a history of kind of the of Zionism and the rise of kind of the state of Israel. And what I thought was very interesting was kind of when he kind of talks about the early days of the movement and how there were a lot of different kind of strains of thought and
Sure.
ideas for kind of strategy on how to get to the outcome of a Jewish homeland. And there were many people in that movement who advocated for far more peaceful paths. And of course, in any movement, there can be different factions that emerge and different strategies that emerge. Frankly, I think it's very informative for me to try to study and understand, because what the Free State Project is doing is very, very different. We are not based around religion or ethnicity. We are based around an idea of liberty. We are, trying to build a libertarian homeland, and there are people with different ideas on tactics and strategy and how to achieve that. And some maybe who are more militant than others, and some who are more seeking more kind of, maybe softer ways than others. So there is something to learn there. But I think it is kind of, helpful to look at history and understand that there is nothing inevitable about history. There are people along the way, individuals who make decisions that have long-term consequences, and we can always choose every day a different path.
We can, and we're talking about language here, and I heard everything you just said, Eric. We were talking earlier about minor victories, or how movements are shaped, or how they come into being during this debate about Israel and what they're doing in Gaza. Mark Levin has always said, if you use the word neoconservative, that means you're anti-Semitic. That was his thing, right? Then, like 3 days later, after the last time Mark Levin said that, Trump was criticizing the neocons. And Mark Levin has not made that argument since. Now, Trump, while he's doing all the wrong things right now, foreign policy wise, as far as I can see, continuing to send money and aid to Ukraine, and just kind of letting Israel walk all at our expense financially and other expenses. Stuff like that's a victory. People notice that. Oh, I can say neocon, but why? Because that means something. It's a brand within the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. And it means support for all war anywhere for any reason. Now, that sounds sort of cartoonish and simplistic, but that's really what they stand for. And for a period, that's what most Republicans believed. And we're in a very different place now. And to talk about this stuff has nothing to do with hate or anti-Semitism. It was always the left that was like, oh, Sydney Sweeney has a jeans commercial. She must be a Nazi. And we're like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Well, that's what a lot of people do now if you want to talk about a particular government. It's funny. All these conservative talk hosts, especially like Mark Levin, who would make these sorts of arguments. Imagine, here's a guy who's built his entire career off criticizing the United States government, right? Imagine if we were like, oh, he hates Americans because he criticizes Washington. Everybody would be like, that's patently stupid. Right?
Of course, that's what the neoconservatives did during the Bush administration.
Absolutely. So, you can't criticize America's government. That means you hate Americans. You're anti-American. That's just dumb. Right. Israel's government, like most governments, do bad things, and we should be able to talk about it. You'll have more debate over what's going on over there right now in the Jerusalem Post than you will on Fox News.
Yeah, well, that certainly seems to be the truth.
It's true.
Jack, as we're approaching the end of the hour, I do want to ask you, though, you were just up at Pork Fest for the second year in a row. We were so glad to have you back. There were so many things going on. I missed your talk at the main pavilion, but I know that we'll be publishing that in the near future, so folks should watch our Free State Project social media for that. I haven't seen it yet, so I don't even know what you spoke about. But having caught your remarks the year before, I know it must have been excellent. Do you want to say anything about what you spoke about there, and also like how was your experience at Pork Fest?
I mostly spoke about the results of WrestleMania 41. Everybody was very excited to hear. No, I talked about a lot of what we're talking about here today because that's what fascinates me. I'm not an economist. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not good at that stuff. But like political movements and how you get there, that's always fascinated me in what we're talking about today. My experience at Pork Fest, it was my second Pork Fest. I was embarrassed at my first Pork Fest that it was my first Pork Fest because it's been in existence as long as it had, and I'm such a latecomer. Being in the liberty movement as long as I have, but not experiencing this wonderful thing that you have every spring in New Hampshire. Every summer. It was right on the cusp right there. Yeah. It was just great. The feeling of community, seeing people that I hadn't seen in a long time and was glad to see, meeting people. I like the diversity of it, and I'm not trying to be like some left douchebag. everybody kind of did their own thing, and nobody bothered. Everybody respected everybody doing their own thing, whether that was a religious thing some people were doing, or a not that thing, and some people wanted to dance in certain sorts of ways. It was all over the place, cooking, baking. Certainly tried different types of alcohol at Pork Fest. That was fun. I just had a great time. I can't wait till next year and every year.
And what are you looking forward to in particular this weekend at the Ron Paul 90th birthday barbecue?
I want to see him have his moment. He still does the Ron Paul Liberty Report, which I watch and is great, with Dan McAdams, and he's doing that, and he's still such a voice for our movement and whatnot. But his accomplishment, he didn't want to run for president. People kind of like, you probably should. And boy, did it pay off dividends. Yeah. His life and achievements go far beyond what he did in 2008, 2012. That's what most of us know him for. His time in Congress, his family, the whole thing. I can't wait for this weekend just to honor the man that changed my life. And Eric, I don't want to speak for you. I think changed your life too, and changed the lives of so many others for the better. And I'm not trying to make him into like a god or something. He would be mad at that. That's not what I'm doing. But he's a human being who has been a and has led the country and so many of us in a better direction than it had been prior.
I think a lot about, I tweeted something out a few weeks ago, and I think, Jack, you screen captured it and shared it from one of your pages. And I was thinking about, this was right when Trump was kind of steering towards the neocons on the foreign policy with Iran and Israel-Palestinian conflict and all of that. And, I think it was something along the lines of, the MAGA movement is experiencing something that there will come a point when you have to choose between your principles and the political figure that you rallied behind, because there's always a separation, and the only exception to this is Ron Paul, who never made you choose. And I think that is one of the great things about Ron Paul, right, is his emphasis. I mean, at the end of the day, he's such a humble man. Mm-hmm. While so many kind of revere him and respect him, I think he gets a little embarrassed sometimes about mm-hmm. the pedestal that people put him on. And I certainly recognize he's a human being and he's flawed like all of us. But boy, there is a certain just stoic resolve that he had, and a commitment to principle that, I don't know that you see maybe but once or two times in an entire civilization. In terms of someone on the political stage like that. I think when I look back in history, maybe you could point to Thomas Jefferson. I think a lot about Cato the Younger in the final days of the Roman Republic. Yeah. I always think about, and Jack, I don't know if it was you who said this or something. I think it was you, actually. You look at back in 2012 and 2008, and you look at all the books that were published by all these presidential candidates, and what's on the cover of the book? What's on the cover of the book for Mitt Romney and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama? It's their face, right? But what was on the cover of Ron Paul's The Revolution? It was the Constitution, and to find his face, you had to turn to the back. For Ron, it was always about the ideas and the principles, and that's why his movement will last, because it doesn't require him to be the active figurehead that everyone is rallying around in every presidential cycle. It continues beyond him because he was the messenger for ideas, and I think that's his legacy.
It's funny, a couple months ago when Pope Francis passed and they had to choose a new pope, I saw one of the bishops speaking on one of the news channels, and he made the comment that you typically want the person who wants it the least to be the next pope. And I think that applies to Ron Paul. I'm not calling him a pope. What I'm saying is he never wanted to be a celebrity. It's what you just said. He wanted to get his ideas out there and spread these ideas, and he has. He's not on the cover of his books. He ain't trying to be that. That's who you want in leadership, and that's what he is. Even if he's so humble about it and doesn't want all the attention, well, you got it, because people are wonderful ideas.
Yeah. Well, Jack, I really look forward to seeing you in person this weekend. We'll celebrate Ron's birthday. I hear there are a few birthdays going on, actually, so we'll celebrate a few birthdays.
We'll celebrate your 68th birthday this weekend too. That's coming up.
Yeah. It is my 37th birthday this Friday, everyone. I was born on 8/8/88, and Ron Paul
That's crazy.
Ron Paul is overshadowing my birthday this year, but good on him. He deserves it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to see you, Eric. It's gonna be a great weekend. I've enjoyed the conversation today.
Yeah. Well, Jack, thanks for coming on the show. I'll see you in Lake Jackson.
Yes, sir. See you then.
All right, everyone. That's the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Of course, if you're coming to Lake Jackson this weekend, I'll be sure to say hello if you see me. I would love to hear from you, and any feedback you have on the show is always appreciated. And of course, it's very rare for me to promote and advertise something that is taking place outside of New Hampshire, because our mission is to get liberty lovers to come and visit New Hampshire. But of course, we make all kinds of exceptions for Dr. Paul, because I wouldn't be here. So many of us wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the groundwork that he laid, the seeds that he planted, and the gardens that are growing now because of the work that he did. But of course, I want to remind you, we have events year round in the Free State. And if you aren't actively already here in New Hampshire, like so many who watch the show, I'm sure certainly are, we really do want you to come and visit and meet the community. And look, I recognize that not everyone who comes to visit us at PorcFest or Liberty Forum or the Granite Freedom Trek or the Free State Bitcoin Digital Asset Conference or Fall Fest or any of the events that are going on year round in New Hampshire, I recognize that not everyone is going to make the move, and that's fine, but come and experience the community that's being built here. Come and see how great it is to have a healthy, vibrant, growing libertarian communities. And even if you don't make the move, I'm sure you'll go back to your libertarian friends wherever you're from, and you'll tell them how great these events are and how amazing it is what's being built in New Hampshire is taking place. And maybe some of them will make the move and join us, or maybe you will join us one day. I certainly hope so. But wherever you are, if you are in the fight for liberty, just know that we are building the homeland for liberty right here in New Hampshire, where we can lead the way with putting libertarian ideas into practice, like school choice and abolishing income taxes. And we're leading the charge on Defend the Guard. Was just on a great Zoom conference call with many great people like Scott Horton and Dan McKnight yesterday, on Monday, talking about that. We are building something unique here in New Hampshire, and I certainly hope that you will get the opportunity to come and experience it and get a taste of it. And in the meanwhile, thank you for watching the show. Again, I'll remind you, we have 184 Porcupine patrons, and I would love it if you would be the 185th. We would like to get to 200 Porcupine patrons by the end of the summer. This, of course, helps support our year-round mission at the Free State Project as we promote to the libertarian diaspora. We outreach to outside liberty groups and individuals. We invite them to come and visit New Hampshire. We welcome them when they have decided to make the move, and we help them facilitate that move. And we engage with those who are here active in the Free State community to help build those communities. That is how all 5 steps, what we're doing year round to build the Free State. And if you would be so kind as to be a part of what we're doing by chipping in and becoming a Porcupine patron, $10 a month. And that's like, what is that? Like 2 cups of coffee a month to build the libertarian homeland? You kidding me? What a great deal. And of course, so many benefits that go with it. Learn more at fsp.org/give. And would love to report to you all that we have 200 patrons Porcupine patrons by the end of the summer. All right. That's the show for today. Furthermore, everyone, my opinion is the Federal Reserve should be